Okay, so to give a little introduction, now what we're going to talk today about is a very peculiar national or local experience with the internet, no, which is like kind of the Cuban case, which is very much shaped by very peculiar internal and external political and social dynamics. So Cubans' access to the internet has been and still is limited by two factors. On the one hand, we have the Cuban government that is very, we could say, autonomy phobic, no, and has for a long time restricted its citizens' access to digital technology and the internet to maintain control over the information flow within the country and also to prevent the spread of dissenting voices or dissenting ideas, making the island one of the least connected countries in the world until only a few years ago. But on the other hand, we also have the US embargo, no, that still restricts Cubans' access to many digital services that like we are very much accustomed to in the rest of the world, like Zoom, for example, is not accessible from within Cuba. The Apple App Store and the Google Play Store are not accessible. Everything that involves online payment, obviously, is not accessible for Cubans because of the embargo. And we're going to talk a bit about how these two, this internal and this external factor, has shaped the Cuban experience of the internet, and also the very interesting workarounds that Cuban people have come up with to make up for their scarcity of internet, no? Cubans' access to the internet in recent years has changed twice, and each time quite radically in the last 8 years. It really changed a lot in 2015. Nestor, maybe you can show the first and maybe also the second. Still here. In 2015, the Cuban government for the first time opened public Wi-Fi hotspots in parks and squares within like different cities of the country. And these so-called Wi-Fi parks became the first places where most Cuban people made their first acquaintance with the internet. And then in December 2018, so just like not even 5 years ago, the state introduced mobile internet. Maybe you can show the next image, on like scratch cards, but also like, with like prepaid. And this is really also the first time where it really made sense for Cubans to use social media. And we're also going to talk a bit about how that changed, like also the social and political dynamics in Cuba. Even though access has become better in these recent years, Cubans' access to the internet is still characterized by slow speeds, high costs, and a very inadequate infrastructure, where people in Cuba have also created all these like really, really fascinating alternative technological infrastructures to make up for this scarcity. But maybe to beginning, I would like to ask both of you how you first accessed the internet.
Me? Okay. Hi, and thank you all for being here. It's like a great pleasure to visit Berlin, like a dream come true. And thank you, Stefan. Okay, I remember my first time, like my relationship with internet started when I was like 16 or 17 years old. As good Cubans, most of the things related with technology involves piracy. So this is like an endless relationship. We pirated almost everything. So my parents back then, we have a computer, which I think that it was like something with my friends. I mean, not all of my friends had a computer, so I had a computer because my parents give me that dream. And they were paying a service of internet to a doctor, which was our neighbor. Back in Cuba, some doctors, because medicine is one of the fundamental pillars of our country.
And also your economy, no?
and our economy.
Because the Cuban state always rents out their doctors to countries like Brazil or different African countries, during COVID, even to Italy,
yeah. Well, the thing is that doctors had internet, but I mean, not internet, just email service. But at least you can communicate with others through mailing. So my parents, I remember that they were giving to this doctor, like at the beginning was $60, but then was like...
Which year was that?
Cheaper. It was like 2012, I think. And Yeah, we just have email service, and it was super slow. We have this email, sharing email, and just to communicate through email and nothing else.
And Nestor, how was your first experience with the internet?
Well, actually, I coming from another city that is not the capital. I coming from Camagüey. It's a city in the center of Cuba. And I remember that when I get, because I coming from a small town in Camagüey, when I get in Camagüey to start to be like an art student, I have this first experience in this like a super like underground places that just because you have a friend that give you this access, but was like more like a cyber cafe. We know cafe, just like 3 computers, and you pay for hour to get access to very, very slow internet. This was like my first experience. I always remember like, create like the first email address, like a Google, Gmail address. And for me, it's the same that I am using today. It's like a very weird because it was like an automatic, name. And it's like a super weird with my name and first name, last name thing. And I don't know, like for me, this experience was like amazing, but in the same way, like a super difficult to, getting access to that. I think like I just get for first time like a more normal experience with the internet when I get in the university in Havana, in the ISA. But always like, this idea of the internet, like before the Wi-Fi park, was always like the water of the sea. Like you get a little bit of connection and you lost for an hour everything you was doing and getting again. And it's like super unstable, super fragile, and super weird because you don't have this like a deeply experience to actually do it with no thinking about the time or the speed or what you can do it. Like was very interesting.
Okay. Leslie, how was it to use the internet in 2015 when these like parks opened? I imagine it wasn't a very private experience.
It was kind of crazy because visited a park in the city. It was like arriving to a place full of laptops and full of people with laptops and phones, and it was like a concert of conversation of every type. I mean, like you can hear the mother arguing with his daughter because the mother is not in Cuba, maybe it's in the States or in another country, or maybe the mother is a doctor giving some mission in other country. You can hear couples arguing like every time and super out loud because we as good Cuban, we speak a lot and out loud. And it was like a big concert of conversation, of private conversation. And I think that this is very important because internet, it is a place of privacy and that you can share your information. And in this situation in Cuba, the internet was a public service. So sometimes you were also sharing your password with another person because I don't know your hour, because in these public spaces of Wi-Fi, 1 hour costs like $2.
Yeah.
1 hour of connection. And if I'm with Nestor, maybe we just spend $2 for the two of us, and we share our email
like
or our
hotspot
password. Yes. So it was like a public space with public conversation of people,
Yeah, it was very peculiar because like everywhere, this idea of like be online, it's very like a very private experience. Like, and also in another countries, it was like a issue because it's like you get online, you have this like a digital life that is completely alone in your privacy. But in Cuba, the digital life was like very public. Like you are just sit down with strange people around you, like here, like super close to you because it's not, was so many people in this public park. Was a few public, like a hot spot parks in different part of Cuba, and like a lot of people just getting there and just find like an alternative way to sit down. And one of the
what
things.
would you say? What most people did online? What was like the main reason?
I think
going
communication
online?
was the main thing at the beginning.
With like
And
people
social
outside
media.
of
Yeah,
Cuba.
this was like at the beginning of the social media, but you can imagine like, just have like a Facebook account that you can just check like 1 or 2 times per week, and like you get there and you try to respond all the messages or try to like navigate in the scroll to try to see what your friends are doing or whatever. But this was like a 2 times, 3 times per week or something like that. Another thing that was like a very interesting in this like beginning of the internet in Cuba was like like Cubans always find a way to create this kind of like a legal, like something is between legal and illegal practice that is not like a completely like a clear about if you're supposed to do it or not. And the thing is like we have just like one company of communication that give internet. It's like a kind of like a governmental monopoly of communications in Cuba, ETEXA. But when you buy these like cars with 1 hour of internet, they don't make any limitations. Like you legally can share if you want this connection. And Cubans like discovered that they can buy the time like buy this card from ETEXA, put it in a computer and using like this software, Connectify, and just share the connection with more than like 10 another people. This means that you are like this create a business in this public park. Like you get this connection, and after you like the price of the internet was like a super cheaper in this like a second economy system. And actually, I can say that my first like a real experience with more like a time to navigate was using this Connectify system.
Okay, so we can say that until today, Cubans don't really use the internet, for example, to like stream movies or stream music, no, because it's just too expensive to buy these data packages. But then on the other hand, Cubans were never really completely disconnected from like global pop culture, no, and Cubans are avid consumers of Brazilian telenovelas and Korean K-pop, no. Can you explain how that worked, that Cubans got access to like foreign media?
Yeah, like we can say definitely, the access to internet was always an issue in Cuba, but we can say like in a way, Cuban, like the different communities, like the art community or like, people that want to see telenovelas or some specific show, we can say that, the information is fluid in Cuba. Like people are coming to Cuba all the time from outside, and these people create a selection of content. For example, in the art world, like a lot of curators or another artists or friends was coming to Cuba, and always when these people coming inside the country, they bring a lot of information, like a folder structure with a lot of materials. And we can say that, because every Cuban have like all the Cuban citizens have like a normally USB in the packet, like we always have that. Like was very natural to share information with your friends completely offline. This practice was like a super strong, and we can say in a way, we'll not have like this like a real-time relation with the information, but we'll always, also before the internet, we'll always have access to some information.
And your family is basically, you come from a family of alternative informal media distributors,
yeah,
right?
Here you can see like one photo that is from the Weekly Packet, one of the big phenomenon that we have in Cuba, specifically in relation with the distribution, like offline distribution and informal distribution of digital material, using like a human infrastructure of like a net that is like with a human infrastructure that it's not just in one city, it's just in all the city. We can say like we have like a 12 or 11 million of Cubans, and all these people consume the Weekly Packet directly or indirectly. And in my personal like experience, like my grandfather was one of these persons that after the revolution, like in the beginning of the revolution, when the complete system of Cuba changed and the government stopped all the connection with the entertainment material that coming from outside, specifically from United States, for example. After that, inside of like Cuba, start all this like alternative business and underground business to distribute entertainment material. My grandfather started with books and novels, like super popular Latin American, like Corín Tellado or Estefania books and novels. And with the democratization of technology that exists in the world and also happened in Cuba, at some point my grandfather, started to have access to videotapes, and the famous Bancos de Película started in Cuba. All this business was like a super to the ground, like sometimes like police get in these places and taking everything, but Cuban people are very strong, and all this practice continue until today. Like after the videotapes, like my grandfather used like a DVD and CDs, and like we'll understand to like what we'll call today the weekly packet is the SIM like a social structure, the SIM net that happened from many years ago, but using computers, hard drive, and USB.
Can you explain a bit more what El Paquete is and how it works?
The weekly packet is practically like a one hard drive with 1 terabyte of information. We can say it's like a version of internet completely offline in a structured folder. And the distribution is like, you can go into these places, like public places, to buy whatever you want. Like, to have an idea about what you can find. The weekly packet is very simple. You can find everything, like from software, application, antivirus, like video games, application for fun, but also like all the last movies, like Marvel movies, but also like a super low quality or like a very independent movies. Every TV show that you can imagine, a sport, like everything.
Leslie, how did you also consume El Paquete, and how did you get access to foreign films?
My parents were in love of El Paquete. Like it was like almost a sickness because they have the necessity of consuming telenovelas and series and movies, action movies like Fast and Furious, which is a huge phenomenon in Cuba. But we didn't have a terabyte hard drive. We didn't have it back then. It was, and I think also now, it's like super expensive and almost impossible to buy. So we do have a flash, like every Cuban, a flash with maybe 25 gigabytes or 50 gigabytes. And we have like a point, a house of paquetero, which is the name that we give you to this to this person
who sell these data
who sells information, because these people were selling information, audio, visual information. So we went there and we just choose the information that we want to have for a week. And then the process starts over and over again every Sunday or every Monday when the information just actualizes. And yeah, it was like that most of the Cuban. And at the end, everyone started to have a hard drive because the necessity of consuming more and more information ended up in a wiki package with 2 gigabytes, right?
Yeah. Well, today we can say that we'll have like almost like a update like every day. We can say like for example, if you are like a super fan of one like I don't know, like an Amazon TV show or like I don't know, whatever is happening, you can see this movie like one day before or this episode.
Yeah. So how it works basically now is that there is like kind of a network of people, mainly in Havana, who have like privileged internet access, because they work for the government or they work in tourist hotels, who download that stuff, and then there's people who compile this data collection and they kind of know what Cubans want to see, right? But what I find very interesting and what I would also like to ask you, Nestor, so El Paquete nowadays doesn't only work for distributing foreign media content, because also local people use it as an alternative to the internet, as an alternative infrastructure, What are Cubans themselves circulating through this human infrastructure?
Yeah, this is another thing that is very interesting. Like when the weekly packet happened before the internet in Cuba, like even this last stay, and this was the only way to distribute digital material in Cuba. This means that, for example, all the industry of musicians in Cuba, they prefer to have a premiere of the last song or the last a video clip on the weekly packet. Also, we'll to understand more how media work in Cuba, weekly packet is bigger and more popular than any media or a national media in Cuba, including the national television, including radio. All these media are in complete control of the government, are very slow with a lot of limitations, and the weekly packet is just a completely open platform. We can say just is like Stefan say, like we have like two big companies, or we can say like a group of people that download content in Havana, and after they start like a human distribution, but it's not like a one business or something like that. It's completely open and decentralized. This means that, you know, Leslie and I, we can just like buy one copy of the weekly packet and create our own version and keeping sharing with another people. This means that in any step of this like net, you can include materials, and you know.
But can you maybe a bit explain how it actually works? No, because you yourself, you have like kind of an arts folder within that structure. No, so you're distributing information for young artists. You use it as a digital exhibition space. You mentioned musicians using that network to distribute their videos.
Advertising, like
there are Cuban restaurants are putting the advertising. But how does it actually work? Like, where do you go to? Who do you pay? How do you get your material distributed through that network?
Normally, do you have like multiple ways? You know, for example, here we can see like how they, you know, transport a hard drive to, you know, they create this like a recycle and, you know, cases for protection.
Because this data travel from Havana throughout the whole
like
country, no?
it's not like they don't have like a official card or something like that. They're just using whatever, like from like a train, motorcycle, bicycle, bus, like whatever is the best connection between one city and the older city. They're just using that, and normally it's like a full bag, a bag full of hard drive. And you know, like this is the thing, like because it's very open, you can just go directly to this like you know, point of sale in your like blog and just bring some material. But normally, because it depends of what do you want to include, like. You know, the structure of the weekly packet is mainly focused on telenovelas. This is the most important thing, like movies and TV shows. This is what the people like in Cuba most are interested in about that. And the big limitation about the weekly packet is the size. Like they have like a limitation of like how many material you can include, because the hard drive have, you know, the most easy like or like a popular hard drive have like a 1 terabyte of information. If you want to include something, you are like for example, a restaurant, you must to pay for, because this means that maybe one telenovela is not this weekend in the weekly packet because you want to include your thing. And this is always a negotiation, but they are very open. For example, I have this project about, you know, this is the first project I create in relation with the weekly packet. As an artist, I always like wait to find some like art or art information in the weekly packet, but doesn't exist. Definitely like this, you know. I started talking with the people, one of these like a big matrices, we can say, like this group of people that create the content from the beginning in Havana, and I come in with this idea, hey, like, what happens if I bring you guys like, you know, material in relation with art? Like maybe, you know, definitely this is not so popular like at the reggaeton musicians, but you know, it's something that you don't have. And they was like a very open. At the end, I was not paying nothing to include the material. They are not paying me nothing to give in more information for the structure. And we'll create this kind of like a negotiation when I present like a small structural folder. We can say like a mini weekly packet focused for artists or people that are interested in art, and you know, like a documental films called like PDF books, catalogs, like information about art, local and globally. And also like I create this folder that the name was the gallery folder, and the idea was like present one artist per month, a digital artist that using this like a folder to create like a digital exhibition completely offline. This project just exists in the weekly packet. It's impossible to get access or get information in any like online system or outside Cuba, but I like it like that. And it's very like a natural. I just meet people that I think will be interesting or have project that, like, I don't know, create synergy with this phenomenon. I invite. It's like a complete. It's not just no profit. It's like a zero profits. Like it's just me doing this, and I was doing this project from 2015.
Okay. What other like offline media distribution networks exist in Cuba besides El Paquete?
Yeah, well, the other big phenomenon in Cuba is the SNet. SNet is like we can say like one of the bigger like offline net in the world. is mostly focusing play video games, because also the same problem, like we don't have internet, and like teenagers or like hackers and people that are like very enthusiastic in Cuba about like net and like informatization and create networks. They start to putting together, and at the beginning was like like in every well, like gamers create like LAN parties and try to, bring the computers with one home, and everybody together just play like some like a multimedia, like multiplayer video games. But at the end, also because like in Cuba we have like this neighborhood that are more like the Sovietic aesthetic, like a
social housing.
Yeah, social housing, like a pre-building, housings, and they are like a super close, and the buildings are very high. Was actually very easy to just like put in like one Wi-Fi antenna in the top of the building, or some like cables between one building and the other, and this like net start to growing and growing and growing, and right now it's in all Havana.
So it's a network that exists like in all over Havana and connects like tens of thousands of people, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's incredible how big is or was. Right now, like we don't want to speak a lot about this specific phenomenon, because we actually have like an installation here in Republic, and will be very like interesting, and we are open to talking about that in the installation. But this is a map from Havana, and it's like they are in all the city. Right now.
So we can say that like El Paquete and Esnet have created these like huge human infrastructures that people use to like kind of exchange data offline. But from what I understood, like talking to you and like doing my own research, we can say that in these networks there's a lot of like kind of auto censorship, no? Like people don't really raise their voices politically. They don't really share any like kind of sensitive political content that could be like understood as anti-government, no? But what happened when the state in December 2018 introduced mobile internet, and all of a sudden it really made sense to use like kind of social media, to use WhatsApp and Telegram, which like in the Wi-Fi parks didn't really make sense if you just went there once a week, no? What would you say, how did mobile internet change the social dynamics in Cuba?
I think one thing is important, like the wiki package, all the information in the wiki package was garbage. I mean, was garbage television at the beginning. Was garbage television. It was just MasterChef, American movies, comedians.
Marvel movies.
For example, to me, I never consumed this, but I do consume a lot of information from YouTubers, because I was very into it, gamers. And to me, gamers is what like the big stars on YouTube. And in Cuba, a lot of gamers and the gamers community that were operating offline, when they have access to this information, was like this SNET phenomena just was faster and bigger. And what happened like 5 years after, it was the government took El Paquete. I mean, they took over El Paquete in a certain way. So in El Paquete was no pornography, no political content, or at least incorrect political content. And there were also carpets about ephemerides, which is like every month something related to the Cuban Revolution. It is a celebration, and this kind of stuff that were also in the television start to appear in El Paquete. So I think that it was
and you would say the owners or the organizer of El Paquete did that to not create any problems with the government, because it was also a big economic, like you could make a lot of money also with that system,
yes,
right?
But at the same time, I remember the culture minister talking about El Paquete like a demon. Like they were demonizing El Paquete all the time. Like it's just information about capitalism, garbage, and in a certain way it was, but we didn't knew that thing exists, because the Cuban television is just national. We don't have international information getting inside. I mean, at least not in a normal way. So the main thing is that when the government realized that el paquete semanal was a big thing, and the people were like just in love from all the information, they said, okay, we have to start a negotiation. But the good point, I think, is like this 10 years of consuming information in an offline way, the government realized that we were in a certain way prepared to consume more and to be more open. I wrote something about it, like the honeymoon of our relationship with the internet, because I think that we grow knowing that the internet exists, like it's a space, it's a bad space, it's a space for demon and capitalism and garbage and things that we really don't want, at least that was we were hearing about the government. But we have just this internet like idealized. So our history with internet, we just like romantic and we want to be in love with the internet. So we try different ways to get access to the information. And at the end, in 2018, with after the wiki package and the Wi-Fi parks, finally arrived the data mobile internet. Yeah. And it was like a big thing because we were consuming internet not in real time. I mean, I remember the thing like, I don't know, maybe I was just opening Instagram and seeing a picture of Nestor in New York. And I was like, hey, Nestor is in New York. And 1 hour after, I can see Nestor walking on the street. And I was like, Nestor, are you in New York or not? And Nestor was like, yes, yeah, but that happened 1 month ago or 3 months ago. And with the mobile data, which you people have here, like, I don't know when, but I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years before us, this thing with consuming real information in real time, I think was the big change. Was like, this is happening right now.
Yeah, we can say that the big difference between the internet in Wi-Fi parks and the internet in mobile data was like the Wi-Fi park was more focused in communication between like the people are living in Cuba and people are like outside Cuba. This was like the main use that Cubans make for that. But with mobile data, it will open a window to another type of communication with people are around you, like another Cubans that are also living in Cuba. And also this opened like too many different windows. Like, for example, like in Cuba, we have like all these like, practice of share information, practice of like informal economy that they just jump on internet. And for first time will be like, we'll start to see all these like Telegram groups and WhatsApp groups that, organize a lot of, the way that will, that the country is today. I think definitely like, the limitations in this like, we can say the limitations in the SNet and the limitations in the weekly packet, are the same limitations that every Cuban have. Like, we have all these like, author censorship in our way we'll speak, or every Cuban know what is the like a red line in a way, and it's like it's so like crazy that even it's not completely necessary that the government come in and say, hey, you cannot say that, because every Cuban know that what we can say and what we cannot say inside Cuba.
So would you say that like kind of political discussions are more open and more free on these like American capitalist platforms like Facebook group or WhatsApp?
It's very crazy, but for example, like, because the Cubans don't have the experience to like think about internet in the browser, like the browser experience of internet. We just jump on social platforms, and this is so crazy because, for example, all my family, like my mom, think like a Facebook is internet actually, and whatever they see there, they believe. And this was another big problem, like fake news, for example. And the fake news is like we don't have like a very special problems with the internet. We have the same problem that everybody have in a way. I think the big problem is we don't have the experience to see another way to consume information. We'll just jump on social platforms and everything, all the problems that these social platforms have, like the bubble, like the way that the computer understands what you want and give you that, like you just see what your friends are saying and you think everybody say the same or everybody have the same ideas, but we don't know another way to understand internet. And I think right now, you can see in Cuba a lot of organization, like like a hacker space, like people are developing, like this topic are on the island right now. Like people are starting talking about that, but take time. And I think this was like the big difference between H stay and what is happening right now with all this, like the use of internet.
Would you say that like kind of this access that you mentioned, this real-time communication being like kind of a big game changer, in the social and political dynamics in Cuba? You mentioned these like Telegram groups, that where people have created these like huge black markets, to sell like kind of scarce consumer items, but where people also show solidarity by, for example, exchanging like leftover medicines, and like so we see this process of like kind of autonomous citizen organization, more or less, like kind of starting through these like platforms,
I remember like a very like big example about like what the mobile data create in Cuba. Like for example, we are like a Latin American country, specifically a Caribbean country. Of course, like people help people. Like everybody's very close. Like if you live in a neighborhood, everybody know you. Like is this type of society like very, very, very close? And also, this happening in societies that don't have like a high level of economic result. Like this is a way to survive. Like you must to be close to another people because everybody need help at some point, And but before the internet, the communication was so limited. Like I remember, like even for art, like the artists for create advertising for a specific show, the only way to create that was like a calling directly all your friends or sending a message with your phone. This was the only way. After with the internet, Cubans have like a big access to developing things with a lot of people involved. That actually was maybe the main thing that that the government fear about, like this kind of like a self-organizations. And I am very happy that one of the big examples about one of these like a self-organization was also after the one of the biggest and first tornadoes in Cuba, and was like a very fast like a group of people create like a Facebook group, and for first time in Cuba a group like was massive. People coming from another cities to Havana to help the people, bring food, medicines, and this is like a very cool example about what, a good way to using these like a very weird and not good platforms. I am not trying to, give advertising to Facebook because there's so many bad things inside this platform, but definitely, in Cuba, it's very peculiar how we can use that in connection with this idea of like a human practice.
Yeah. And because Facebook was maybe also the first place initially where like a lot of all civil society groups like kind of reunited, no? Leslie, can you tell us a bit about like kind of how your generation of like young artists, activists, intellectuals have taken up social media? I know both of you were also quite involved in a quite important political event, let's say, or a demonstration. No, that was also fueled by social media uptake.
Okay. First of all, this is very related with two laws in Cuba. One of these is the law 370. Which the government start to spread, and it talks about not spreading your judgment, your political judgment in the internet, specifically in social media like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter.
So it was a law designed to limit free expression online.
Yes, it was a law of censorship. And this one is like for all the Cuban community. And the other one, which is the Law 349, it was just made for artists, for artists, curators, independent journalists, and people who dissent, most of it. So it was a moment where internet was a space that artists and activists were using in a magnificent way to spread their ideas and to create a network and to work together. And of course, this was like a bad thing or a bad image for the government, because at the same time were appearing information, videos, images about a face of the Cuban government that we didn't know. So they suddenly create this law for the Cuban community and also for the artists, because we know that historically artists dissent. Most of it with the government, with the state, with the power. So artists are dangerous. And in Cuba, artists have been always create a way of doing activism. And in this moment, with also the independent journalists were taking places in a big thing. And, well, these two laws were two laws of censorship. And it starts this and jailing, where, I mean, like a lot of artists were put in jail just for dissent or for making a performance or for giving their opinion or just for saying that they are not part of the Cuban Revolution ideas, for example. And of course, the artistic community, we were like super bad because we're our friends, our family, and also we're human. Just doing something that is this is a human right, which is the freedom of expression. So,
can you talk a bit about this demonstration that we're seeing here?
So we during the pandemic, the access to the internet were growing a lot. So we went to the Ministry of Culture, because we were sending letters to the minister just asking for a meeting to arguing about this law, which, of course, if the government make a law, who is approving this law? So you, not us. So it's a law created for us, with affect us, so at least we need to have a negotiation or an arguing. So this never happened. So we said, okay, let's knock the door and let's just visit their house. Hey guys, we're here. Yeah. We really need to talk about something that we think that you're not doing right.
Yeah. Nestor, how did you hear about these protests on that day, on the 27th of November 2020?
Actually, like, being a Cuban artist in Cuba and be happy with this law is just impossible. Like, so many things are wrong, like, in this structure, And this is the thing, like, when, if you create this law about an artist, we know the artist, like, what you are doing at the end. It's like a super, like, not good way to develop about that. And many things happen. Like, I think, like, one person that was like very close to all the Cuban community, Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, that is actually in chair today. He was like fighting very hard with that, and because of that, like a lot of people just come into this place. I think it was like a very, very pacific. As a Cuban and as a human being, I will never support violence in any form, even when I am not like completely not violence in any form. This is my thing. And this was like a super, like a good experience, I think, for us. Like,
I think it was organic because at the beginning we
Super.
were just five of us. It was during the pandemic, and it was we were not allowed to, to be in
I think
group.
what we maybe have to give as a concept is that demonstrations are something that in Cuba normally
Never.
never happens. No,
This
that
was-
like kind of the state actually really controls very much. So even like kind of a gathering of like 300 young people in front of the Ministry of Culture is actually
It's
in
not-
Cuba. It's quite a thing to happen.
for
no?
you guys, maybe it's just like normal, you know,
Okay,
like, but
it's
never, actually, this is the bigger one that happened in Cuba from the 19, that like in the time of the special period, I think it's like a couple of one, but this is the bigger, this was the bigger one in this moment.
As we're running a bit out of time, we can say that like kind of, I think maybe with the social media dynamics, there have been like kind of a smaller like kind of local protests like this, but then like kind of probably the biggest outburst of like public discontent then happened on July 11th, 2021, which I think we have like a little video now, and this day really marked like the biggest protests that happened in Cuba since like probably since the revolution. No, can you explain us or give it a bit of context why you think that all of a sudden these like thousands of people took to the streets in Cuba on that day? What were the reasons behind that?
I think the president was what happened in the 27th of November with the Artists Reunited. We proved that in a pacific way we can manifest, and it's a right to manifest. It's a human right to manifest, and just like 5 or 6 months after that demonstration, this happened. I wasn't in Cuba, but I knew, and our partners and the artist community knew that day, the 27th, was something organic, and was something that it was about to mark the very beginning of manifestation to the Cuban community.
So, Nessa, can you maybe explain a bit on July 11th? Who were the people who took to the streets, and why did it happen that
was too
particular
many
moment?
things happen in the same time. Like for one hand, we'll have like the worst time of the pandemic in Cuba. Like this was like a very, like the people have fear. Like, was like a lot of people dying. Even we can say in Cuba, the COVID pandemic was not so bad in relation with Latin America and other countries. Like they even developed like a vaccine that, I don't know, I am not a doctor, but at least for me work and for my family and my friends. And this is the thing, like, was like a very, very bad moment with a lot of limitations. Like, COVID was bad for everybody in the world, but small countries are worse. And even like Cuba, the development of agriculture in Cuba is so bad right now. Like, we are like importing food for everywhere. Like with the pandemic time, everything was closed, like everything was stopped, was not food in the country. And because of the oil access, also we'll start to have like a blackout of electricity, like power. That did not happen in Cuba from the special period in the 92. Like all these things together, with also internet, with the option to, like at the beginning, these manifestations was like a small manifestation in different part of the country, but because of the internet, this happened before in Cuba, like a small manifestation in a specific very poor neighborhood with people that are very just tired about all this bad situation in the country. They start to go into the street, and because for first time in Cuba, people in real time can see that this is happening in an older city. They start to just do it in Havana, and I think it was like a very, very natural thing, just happen because all these things together, and in a way, I think like it was like a very good way to give like a very clear, information to the government that Cuban people was not happy But sadly, I don't know if, this manifestation actually changed something in Cuba. Unless the way that we understand the country was different for all the Cuban people.
So,
but I don't know if work for the idea of the government understand Cuban people also.
So the government reacted also quite harshly, we have to say. No, a lot of people have put in jail. What would you say? Like, how did your generation specifically react to like kind of the backlash after the July 11th? Like, what are most of your people? How do most of your people from your generation deal with these repercussions?
Our generation and the generation before our generation, and in that way we can continue, is abroad Cuba. I mean, nobody wants to be there. No one. I mean, like a young people doesn't want to be in Cuba. It's not a place to be. It's not a place where you can put your rights on the table, when you can speak and be heard. And after that day, of course, it is a good thing that in Cuba that happened. But after that, it was just repression. People getting in jail, people stay in jail after 1 year, after 2 years of this. So I don't know, my generation, I was like in a lot of pain. Cuba hurts in different ways. I have my family there, I have still friends there, but it's just pain with Cuba.
Is
that also your experience, that everyone is leaving Cuba at the moment?
This is the sad part. Like, everybody's leaving. I think I am. All my close friends are already outside Cuba. I am not. I live in Havana. I am just here visit, like always. I think also from our perspective is different. When I say our perspective as an artist, like, the big limitations about traveling outside Cuba is not just because the Cuban government, is also like the embassies. Like, embassy decide if you are allowed to go to his country or not. And it's super crazy. Like, we can say I have like a PhD in visa applications. I don't know, I think because the type of work that I have, we can say I have lucky. I don't know. I find a way to, traveling outside. When I started to be an artist, I started to exhibit more outside Cuba than inside. For me, Cuba is different because it's a place when I decide to coming back, not a place when I can live, and it's completely different experience. I don't want to leave the country, but hurt also.
As we're running out of time and we also want to allow for some questions, I have a very, very last question for you, and maybe you can answer very briefly. We heard a lot of kind of good things that the internet have brought, like kind of more like kind of a bigger space for expressing yourself, more interconnection between the civil society. What would you say? What are the kind of the bad things that you kind of saw that maybe this increased connectivity has brought to Cuban society?
I mean, the arrival of the internet and the access to the internet in Cuba is not still opened at all. We have to use VPN to access information still. What I think is that at least, I mean, the access doesn't give us freedom of expression, but at least we can create network and organization between us. At least we can be connected, like for real. And at least we are not in the cave of disinformation and in the community offline. We are not in the cave of Platon anymore, at least. So this is, for me, this is the good thing.
Cool. Okay, we have 5 minutes for questions.
First,
Sorry for rushing.
Thank you for sharing. I also don't want to stop because it's so important what you are sharing. And also when something is happening in societies like organically, it's a very important moment. And so I wanted to give time also for this. Thank you for sharing. Do you have questions? I think, Can you please go to the microphone so we can hear you? And thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It was fascinating and it was beautiful. As a Venezuelan, I feel really, really close to all your stories.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you could just talk a little bit about what Cubans abroad are. Like, what is their role in how Cubans are accessing information, choosing information. I just wonder if the communications that they now have with their loved ones abroad has influenced the way in which they negotiate with information, with packages, with new connections, with the media that they want to consume, and so on.
In a good way and in a bad way. In the good way, we, for the ones, we can communicate organically and in real time with our family abroad, because in Cuba, families are separated. I have been separated from my sister for 15 years without seeing her. Now in Barcelona, she came to visit me, but for example, during the meantime, we didn't have any communication. So this is the good thing. But the bad thing is that also Cuban families are separated because they don't think the same about political. So right now, this is a lot of social media warfare and polarization between families, between friends that stayed in Cuba and friends that, or family that are out of Cuba. And this is really, really, really nasty. Like, for real. It is disgusting how people can argue and how people can damage their personalities and their own history just for a political issue.
The thing is that around Cuba, like in this scenario, nothing is like, it's like a black and white. Even like, for me, because I am a Cuban that don't want to emigrate outside Cuba, I can receive a lot of attack because they believe that everybody that lives in Cuba is just part of the government. And it's not true. I am trying to fight him from inside also. And this is the thing. Like, I will always like try to, I don't know, say that, whatever, like any action that create more polarization is something that will, as a community in general, as an artist, that the big artists that are outside Cuba must to think very well. Like when you create these like, limitations about not participate or not talking, you are creating polarization. I think we must to try to create this space so everybody can talk from different perspectives, because we are also different people. Like, and this concept, like, freedom is so difficult to understand what is exactly. Like, for one hand, it's very simple, but for the other hand, like, mean different things for different people in different parts of the world. And this is like, this idea of schematization create, this polarization, and this is what is destroying the idea of Cuba. And this also coming with the internet too.
And also because we are not used to it, to think differently. We were educated to think in one way, and everybody is a community, and we have to think the very single thing, and we have to be like this. So we are not used to that. I think that maybe in 5 or 10 years,
20 maybe,
maybe we are going to be in the stage of understanding that people can think differently from
and live together.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. So maybe we'll stay with the last sentence in some years, but the same for every society, that we can think differently and be able to have a space to exchange.